Yeah, no, I'd like to take the long picture with things like this because, I mean, viruses are nothing new. We have viruses every single day. I mean, one of them is called the flu. And we were in Egypt having a pretty good time. And I just sort of figured that, you know, some people just have the antibodies with which to fight viruses like this. Some, unfortunately, don't. And that's the part and parcel of what happens when you come here and manifest on this strange and crazy planet. And it was kind of funny that we went into the Great Pyramid to do this wonderful meditation. It's like you were stepping into another world. And we come out and the whole world has changed. And I wondered, have we actually come out of the wrong exit of the pyramid onto a different planet? Because it kind of felt like that. It was almost comical. And back then, you know, really no one had died yet. So we kind of saw the humor in this, but obviously it's much more serious than that. But great things always come from great calamities. If you look at anything, any time period on the planet, every calamity is followed by great advances in positive things. And I like to think of this as another way to look at the reality of which we're faced with. For one thing, I'm looking out of my apartment here in Maine, and the sky looks like we're in Sedona. I mean, it's the most beautiful blue color. Maine is renowned for having some of the best air quality and some of the worst air quality in America, because although we only have 3 million people here, we also get everybody's pollution. It blows this way. And right now, it looks like Sedona. It's a beautiful blue sky. You can hear the birds singing. In fact, it's wonderful, the peace and quiet. And the other good thing is, like Robert said, I'm treating this as a monastic retreat. One of the last people that was under house, I'm going to call it house arrest, was Shakespeare, and he wrote King Lear when the plague was devastating Europe, and we know how bad that was. So I have actually been quite busy. I've just finished, in fact, I'm literally at this very moment putting the last touches to a documentary on Scotland and some of the sacred sites there, and discovering new things about the origin of who put the megaliths in Scotland. And I tied it into a trip we did to Sardinia with Gaia last year. And I never would have put Sardinia and Scotland together. But so these moments have a wonderful ability to sort of bring you back down to earth and get you to reconsider your priorities. And to reevaluate the choices that you've made, and hopefully you'll make some better ones. So nothing is ever a loss in my mind. It's always a way to move forward and adjust. And I think that evolution has borne this out to a great deal, that wherever we've come to trials and tribulations and hurdles, I think a sense of perspective is what helps us move us forward and gets us to become the people who we were born to be. So, you know, don't take comfort in the fact that we've had this moment to reevaluate, and hopefully your health is doing as well as mine is right now, and we'll keep on going that way. Over to you, Robert.
Yeah, Freddie, I wonder, is there anything you can think of beyond resurrection of how this compares to what knowledge of ancient Earth and sacred sites could speak to current times?
Oh God, absolutely. One of the things that became very obvious to me early on with sacred sites, especially the megalithic sites, was the fact that they were built with ridiculously sized rocks. Now, it's as though these people, although clever as they were also quite silly in a way, because why make life so hard for yourself and have rocks building these pyramids and temples that we see all around the world, which either require a lot of people to move them or some technology that we are no longer aware of. And it made me realize, just again, stepping back, looking at the big picture, that they're meant for these things to last. And when I read a lot of ancient descriptions of cultures who interacted with what we call the gods 11,000 years ago, one of the things that they described is that they had the ability to move without moving. They could travel without moving. They could see far. In other words, they had the ability to project into the future and find out what we were doing and what we were up to. And I suspect that they were able to figure out that at this point in our evolution, we would be facing some pretty serious challenges. No different to what they had, by the way. I mean, they had meteorites coming out of the sky to contend with. So put that into perspective into our lives. We should stop whining. We had nothing to complain about. And I figured that they were built these sites for a time when we would lose our connection to nature and also to ourselves. And I've also come to see over the last 2 decades more and more people going to ancient temples and sacred sites than ever before. I mean, it's not just tourism. These are people who are seeking something better. And I'm putting two and two together. And finally come to the conclusion that these temples are beginning to draw to them the very people who are looking for a point of connection. And I've already made it clear in many of the books that I've written that every single sacred site on the face of the earth, without exception, is built at the crossroads of the earth's energy field. And when you interact with these temples, once you cross the threshold, you're in a different environment. And because your body is built of exactly the same stuff, in other words, electromagnetism, you interact with these spaces and you come out a better person, hopefully, than when you went in. And I see this in my groups when we go out of the temples and I look at people's faces, and they're not the same people that when they arrived 10 days earlier. And it's very important for now because we're looking for the answers to problems that we're faced with. And I say, always visit the ancient sites and let go of a preconception, let go of whatever you've read, even my stuff, and just find out if you, for a minute or for an hour, you can interact with something greater than yourself. And I find that this is a wonderful antidote for getting around the problems that we have today. It's a wonderful way to get the tools that we need to figure out where we come from and where we're going. I'll give you a personal example. Every time I go to any sacred site, whether it's by myself or with a tour group, I always take time just to sit by myself for a few minutes and just ask a few questions. You know, this is what I'm looking for. How can I sort of overcome this? Or how can I arm myself in a way that will help me to be a better teacher to people, to empower other people? And inevitably, either on the moment or a day later or a week later, the answer always comes to me. It could be in a dream, a word, a coincidence, or a book that falls out of a shelf, but it always comes around and it helps me navigate the life. And the same was true for the people who were here before us. They did exactly the same thing. They would go to these special sites and they would meditate, or they would just walk in the spirit of the place. And then by this wonderful moment where you just let yourself go, you know, you got to switch off your left brain thinking. You can't let your brain do the work here. You just got to let this stuff assimilate into your body. And if you just let the spirit of place interact with you, you will find that you begin to develop the tools and the empowerment that leads you to the place where you need to go. And I can't stress this enough. I see this in people all around me all the time, where they are looking for something in terms of answering the problems that they're faced with, and they eventually find them. So that's my suggestion to people, is that to always interact with the sacred spaces. Even here in America, people talk about we don't have any sacred sites, we don't have pyramids. We do. We have them all throughout Illinois, Ohio, around the Mississippi Valley. We have the ancient American mounds. Most people are not buried in the mounds. They are marking the hotspots of energy. So to go and stand on one of these mounds in respectful silence is also to take in that energy of place and feed yourself. It goes back to what you were saying earlier about the concept of resurrection. Resurrection really is a part and parcel of an initiation system. And initiation means to become conscious. It's nothing to do with being hit with a baseball bat on your bum and drinking heavily and going to a sorority. It's nothing to do with that. Initiation is to become conscious. That's all it is. And the resurrection concept was to do with the fact that you involve yourself in a ritual whereby through shamanism or through an induced near-death experience, which sounds quite harrowing, and it was, you leave the body in a meditative state and you come back with exactly the answers that you're looking for. The trick is to put yourself in a state of grace and find out what it is you're looking for. So you set yourself a question. This is what I'm looking for. This is what I need right now. and let go of the expectation. And you'd be surprised what happens when you interact with these moments where you come back, you leave the body, you return into your body, and you're armed with the right technology that you need to progress, whether it's for healing, for spiritual development, or just for the practical issues of life. So all of this stuff that we talk about ancient sacred sites, about the rituals, about the resurrection concept, these are things that have no expiry date. They are working today as it did thousands of years ago, and more so today than ever, because they are that link between us and an invisible universe that is desperate, desperate to help us, because they realize, and I call them they because I've had plenty of experiences with they realize that it's very hard being here on the earth, being in a physical body, and forgetting that you are part of a bigger mechanism called the universe, and it's invisible. And because it's invisible, you don't pay any attention to it, and you don't think it's there. But it is. It's ready to help you, but it can't help unless you ask it to intervene. And then the help comes in a way that is, they're not going to do the work for you. They're going to give you the tools in dreams or suggestions or thoughts or feelings or books, and eventually you apply these tools, and that's how you get through life. And once you realize you've been on this path, you realize how easy it is. So that's why it's important today to look at these old stories and these old teachings, because they were there to last until our time. They have no expiry date.
And the science all says that there's these specific types of energy fields that are going on with these megalithic stones. And I remember Hugh Newman was saying that he thinks one of the theories that he had, and I know that others have written about this, is that the dolmens possibly could have been used to store seeds, and that the resident energy fields between these giant megalithic stones would actually enhance the properties of the seeds, giving them 3 times more likelihood to germinate and propagate, which
Yeah.
is, I mean, that's just a fascinating fact right off the bat.
Yeah, and I used to be 4 foot tall before I touched the men here. Look at me now, 6'5". But it is true. I mean, there was, in fact, one of the best books I ever read. In fact, it's almost a pamphlet, not even a book. It was in the back of a store in Carnac in France, and it was written by Pierre Mérot. He was an electrical engineer, and he thought that all the stuff that we're talking about here was complete, utter nonsense. And he figured he'd go out and test these standing stones in Brittany, in France, of which there are tens of thousands, by the way. And it was amazing what he came up with because, again, as a skeptic, he was saying, well, I'm just going to probe these rocks and find out that they're no more than rocks. It turns out he wrote one of the best books of validating that these stones that were once called sentient beings by our ancestors actually are living. They breathe and they exhale, they inhale. And he was able to measure the frequency of the menhirs, the dolmens, the mounds, and it's one of the best books I've ever read, even in French. It's never been translated ever, and few people are aware of it. Which means that it's always fun to go into the back of a store that sells tourist nonsense in order to find these books in the back of a dusty shelf. You never know where the information comes from. And there was another guy called, and I forget his name. He was the one that was doing the research into the seas to find out the correlation between how huge amounts of people move these stones. I mean, if we go to Central America, for example, if you look at the complex of Tikal or Chichen Itza, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of buildings and pyramids and massive complexes. And you think they must have had a big population to feed. And once we recognize that the temples are electromagnetic and they generate the electrostatic energy and they feed on it and they draw it to these sites, he took it the next stage further. What if we put the seeds on top of the platform of the pyramid of the magician at Chichen Itza? And he found out that yes, the seeds start to get impregnated with the electromagnetic frequency of the site,
Wow.
which means you can get 3 times the amount of harvest from one seed. That is incredible. He also was adamant about burying electrodes all around Stonehenge and Avebury, which is the world's biggest stone circle. And we found the same thing, that just before dawn, these sites attract the energy to them like a big magnet. So if you think about the Earth as a great big electromagnetic ball, it's it's moving around. The energy is moving around all the time. In fact, I'm sitting right now in my apartment, and there's an energy line running right through me. It goes diagonally through my apartment. And oddly enough, this is the only place where I can do any work. This is the only place where I can put my desk. So there's a relationship here. And excuse me. Um, and we found that just before dawn, when the electromagnetic frequency of the Earth has gone to sleep, suddenly the site gets active, and you can measure this. And it begins to attract all the local electromagnetic field to itself. And especially at Avebury and Stonehenge, the energy is drawn through the entrance stones and it starts circulating around the ditch. It's moving around like like the CERN particle collider in Switzerland, if you're familiar with that one. And it goes around and around. And as the sun creeps up above the horizon, you just see the ball of the sun creeping up over the horizon. There's an opening that occurs at the sacred site in its entrance. That's why it's called an entrance. It's an entrance. And if you're there at the right moment, you can feel this whoosh of energy coming right through the stones and you get pushed into the site. And he measured all this stuff. This is actually on paper. So there's a huge correlation again between the sacred site, the individual, and the earth, which is what I was saying, that these sites are self-help centers. You go there to get this hit of energy for whatever it is that you're looking for. And of course, to grow seeds as well. We had some experiments back in the day with crop circles when we found out that the crop circles were being made with exactly the same technology as a pyramid. And we began to bury seeds in the garden. So I did the same thing as well, having been a crop circle researcher in my own right. And I take the seeds from circles that I knew damn well were real, some which I knew very well were hoaxed, and some from the middle of nowhere, normal seeds. And I'd plant them in my garden, and within 10 days, you could see the germination tests where the bed of the seeds from the crop circle that was real was outgrowing the rest of the seeds from a man-made crop circle and a normal seed by at least 2 to 3 to 1. You should have seen the size of my rabbits. They were huge.
Yeah, I keep thinking that these ancient stories and ancient civilizations become more and more important as we reach some sort of critical mass in our own development, that we've gone too far, that we have to reconsider and reintegrate some of the lost technologies that are all around us. They must be all around us if you listen to all the traditions.
Absolutely, and I think that the time has come. If you look at if you accept that all of this is true, that every single culture that was here before was much attuned to its natural world, and they were, and they had the ability to sense and feel and see into the future, which they could, then now what does it mean for us? I mean, think about this for a second. We have, for the first time in human history, we have more souls born in one place. We have, what, 7 billion people on the planet now? I mean, there's never been a time we've had that many people. So something's happening here for a reason. And I'm not just talking about procreation. I'm talking about the fact that something big is happening. If you accept the view that the soul has come to the earth to have an experience, and you keep having these experiences all the time, I mean, it goes on forever. But the fact is, we're all here at this same time now, looking for another leap. That's what it feels like to me. There's a leap going on here. And if we look at the parallel example of the bubonic plague in Europe and in England, especially in the Middle Ages, you find how the great things that came out of the plague was a sort of renaissance, this massive leap in understanding of how things work. And the fact that, the plague taught people, A, you've got to have clean drinking water because that's where it began. And 2, you've got to keep your rats under control. And it made them much more environmentally conscious after hundreds of years of degrading their environment. And then that began to sort of go on an uphill climb until we get the Industrial Revolution, and then everything fell apart again. And here we are. We've now gone to that point where we've reached this critical mass of industrialization and capitalism. And we found it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. We've reached a finite stage where the Earth can only create so much, and we're running out of space. We're running out of things to grow because there's someone who's keeping an eye on this. It's an institute that monitors how long it takes for humans to consume whatever the Earth can grow, and every year the date goes back 2 weeks to the point now. We'd reach a point somewhere in the middle of July where we've now consumed more than the Earth can regenerate in 1 year. That's dangerous. And again, it's these moments that gets us to sit back in monastic retreats inside our houses and think, what are the choices that I have done? Are the choices that I've made correct for this? Because I'm adding to this problem. What else can I do? And it gets us to reevaluate. And we've come to that same point in time again, where we have to reevaluate what we're doing in order to go to a new level of understanding. And if you're a physicist, you'll understand this. It's called the law of chaos. And if you understand anything about the universe, you don't have to be a scientist to really understand this, but there's only two states. One is chaos, and the other one is order. And that's all that exists in the universe. There's two states. Once you have a level of order, you think, great, I'm having a fantastic time. My retirement fund is doing really well. My books are selling. And before you know it, within a decade, things are falling apart again. You're back into chaos. Now, we found ourselves in a situation right now where we've had, in the last 2 generations, an unprecedented amount of growth. And I don't think anybody can really disagree that since the Second World War, we've had unprecedented growth. I mean, we're having the best time that any human being has ever found. I mean, we've had new laws which protect people from being hung from trees or burnt alive. I think most women around the world have the vote, and it's slow, but we're getting there. We are becoming much more aware of what we should do and what we shouldn't do to each other. And what happens is, when we start seeing a lot of chaos around us, it means that there's a potential to another jump to order. And the physicists will say, well, if you see a huge amount of chaos in your life right now, there is a potential for a massive level of order to come out of this. So the level of chaos is relative to the level of potential jump to order. And if we're seeing, and it's all a matter of perception, if you're seeing a lot of chaos around you right now, the potential jump to a new level of order is huge. So I think we're sitting again on that sort of edge where we have this new potential to move things forward into a new level of understanding. Someone from India would understand this by looking at the Yuga cycle and saying, yes, each Yuga cycle has come with its own destruction, but look what came out of it, a new plateau to a new height. And as you reach that new height, so of course, the way that we work here on Earth, we destroy ourselves, we shoot ourselves in the foot, and we go back down the hill again. We get down to the bottom of the valley and we go, that's a nice place to climb, let's go back up there. It's much nicer, it's lovely and quiet. And we go up yet again. And in this Yuga cycle that we're now come to a close, and we are in the middle of the close of the cycle, we're supposed to basically finish this cycle by fire. Now that could be metaphoric and physical. A fire is a cleansing. We could have having a metaphoric cleansing of our systems of government, our systems of, dare I say, president, dare I say, financial systems that don't work anymore. But we're also seeing a lot of heat waves. We're seeing fires generated on an unprecedented scale every summer in the Mediterranean. I mean, my country of birth, Portugal, has been decimated by fires. And anybody who's listening in from Australia knows what's happened to Australia just in the last year. We are experiencing a huge amount of cleansing by fire, whether you see it as physically or metaphorically. So we are now in that moment of change. And this is where, again, reading back at the old traditions, reading what these people told us thousands of years ago is so important because they predicted this. They knew this was going to happen. And now, with all of that information, all these books, all these TV shows, and stuff on Gaia, thousands of programs on Gaia television alone, telling us, look, we've got the information. People have done this before. They've been there. They've got the T-shirt, and they survived to tell the tale. And they're telling us through time, look at what the big picture, look at the world around you, not the immediate environment, because once we get trapped into that immediate environment, we get caught into the fear aspect, and that's not going to get you very far. The idea is look at the big picture. Take your ego out of the equation. Look at the big picture around you and see why is this so familiar? Where have I read this before? And how can I get the tools to fix this? Not just for myself, but to be a better example to people around me. So that's, I think, where we are, where we're going. We need to look back at the past in order to move forward to the future, because they saw this coming. We just have to listen to their voices.
Yeah. So essentially, we have the opportunity to enter a new renaissance, or we have the potential to imagine the worst.
Exactly. And that's the wonderful thing about being here on Earth, isn't it, Robert? It's about the fact that we have free will. Um, some of the best people and greatest friends I've had have been some of the best psychics in the world. And I'm part of a group myself in England that we have been privy to information that I really shouldn't say on air, because it involves some very destructive events that have happened in the last 20 years. And they've all come to light, and we knew about them before they happened. And I have to keep a certain amount of confidentiality in what I'm told, but it's all the information is basically being given to us in a way that frames the current concept, the current paradigm, from the point of view of the people who are also outside of the planet. Now, you can call them aliens, spirits, whatever. I just call them people like us. And there's a lot of people outside of our planet looking in saying, we're very concerned about the outcome of this, and we are involved in the outcome, because whatever you do, whatever choice you make on this planet right now is going to affect our outcome as well. Everything has a repercussion through time and space. It's not just limited to the planet. What we do here is going out there as well. It's all about energy. And we hear about UFOs and other civilizations being close to us and around us. And actually, that's absolutely true. And again, they're saying, we are more than happy to help, because we know what you're going through. It's really bloody hard being in a physical body. You know, being a soul trapped in a limited vessel called a body, and being trapped in this place called the physical world. But you know what? You chose to be there. You agreed to be there, so enjoy it. But you know what? We are helping. We are sending you information. The crop circles are one of the ways in which they've been communicating. I mean, we have extracted a new method of propulsion, which is exactly what we were told in the channel material 25 years ago now it is. Wow, time flies. 25 years ago, a good friend of mine in England was channeling this information. We didn't even know what a crop circle was back then. In fact, it took 7 days to work out what they were talking about. And they said, you know, we're going to give you new methods of propulsion hidden in these symbols that we will be displaying in your fields. And they said, what the hell are they talking about? This is how channeling works in the real world. Everybody sees channeling as being very spiritual, but it's actually, there's a lot of swearing that goes on, because we're going, what the F are they talking about? New methods of propulsion, new systems of healing in symbols that have been put in fields. And 7 days later, we had the first crop circles that appeared in the south of England. And I can tell you that there are 3 groups of scientists. One are in England, one is in Oklahoma, of all places, one is in Australia. And they've already figured out that the picture that I put on the front cover of my book on crop circles, which is why I put it there, they have developed that design as a 3-dimensional model, and I quote, it defies gravity. So we've been given anti-gravity, because the idea was that these aliens, if you want to call them that, were giving us the information to get off fossil fuels. We have to avert ourselves from fossil fuels. If you think about it, oil is no more than a lubricant between layers of the earth. We're taking the lubricant out. What is that doing to the lubrication of the plates of the planet? And we're seeing a lot of tectonic activity again, much more than of late. That's a reason why we shouldn't take the oil out. It keeps things moving nice and easily. And they've given us the information in the symbols so that we could do it for ourselves. We have to do it for ourselves. So that's just some of the help that we're getting from outside. And when I asked through the channeler, how did we come to this point? The answer that came back was, well, you asked for help as a collective. There are people praying all around the world saying, we need some help here. And I said, well, how far back does this help go? It said it went back to before the Second World War, when there were groups of mystics around the world that could foresee the Second World War, and they began to send out the prayers saying, we need intervention. And the interventions from these beings said, we can't directly intervene, we can assist. And because you have to figure out the things for yourself, otherwise it would defeat the purpose of incarnating. So we're going to give you information bit by bit. And sure enough, they couldn't prevent the war. That's what we do as humans. To get back to your question, whether we can make it, to quote to Jeff Bridges, we can make it chicken salad or chicken shit. I'm sorry, but he's got a great sense of humor, Jeff Bridges. We made chicken shit out of the early 1940s. We had a world war, but what came out of that was incredible. And of course, we've taken that to its nth degree, and now we realize that the corruption set into that. So we are getting a lot of help from the outside. We're getting all the tools. We just have to keep asking for assistance, and it will be given to us. You just have to be aware of the symbols and the signs when it comes to you. Robert, we've lost you again.
Okay,
I'm going to try to read your lips. Oh, there you are.
It reminds me of the movie The Lord of the Rings, the third one, where they actually had to go to the netherworld, so to speak, and to call on those beings from the other side to assist them.
Yeah.
And that's actually how they won the battle in the end. I know it's just a movie, but all the indigenous people also remind us, and the nature religions also remind us to always call on the ancestors and to invite them in to everything that we're doing.
They're pretty bored out there, they want something to do, and no, but they do constantly say, please do ask us for help. We can't intercede or intervene, but we can assist, and it will come through dreams and suggestions and other mysterious ways. But you will get it, but you have to ask us for help. We can't just intervene. That would defeat the very law of non-intervention. And if anybody is listening who really understands Star Trek without the space age thing, because Gene Roddenberry was a genius, he attended the same seance as I did with another very gifted woman called Phyllis Schlemmer. And during her trance meetings, he was given the law of non-intervention, which becomes the foundation for the prime directive. That's why we like Star Trek, because the metaphor and the symbology without the space age theme makes sense. Truth has a ring to it, And when you look at these episodes, you go, you know what Picard just said actually makes a lot of sense in the real world, and it does. That's what I mean by coincidence. People like Roddenberry, people like Tolkien, they would anchor this very ancient knowledge into ways that would become popular. So Lord of the Rings is a great example. Star Wars is a great example. Star Trek is a great example. All of these things, the stories that Paulo Coelho writes are also great examples. Some of the mystic writers from the 80s and the 90s who sold millions of books, it wasn't because the books were fantastic, it's because of the message that they had. That's why they were great. And that's why they became so popular, because there's a seed that sits inside you and it wakes you up to a bigger picture. I remember reading The Alchemist years ago. In fact, I actually heard it as an audiobook with Jeremy Irons, who I've always wanted to hire to do one of my documentaries. He's got a great voice. John Hurt passed away, so I'm going to go and use Jeremy Irons if I could afford him. And I remember just sitting there in the car hearing the story, and I thought, it's such a simple story. Anybody could write this. I could write this on the back of a napkin, but you know what? It's the message that sits in here, and you go, that's a really great message, well told. And it does. It's like the other one is Jonathan Livingston Seagull. Just go back and reread Jonathan Livingston Seagull. It's such a simple tale, simply told, and you leave the story going, you know what? The story is so simple and it makes so much sense. And suddenly you start to take on the role that that story tells you. So again, the help is all around us.
Yeah, and the mythologies seem to be speaking through us, through the movies, through the books, through the stories all the time, and we just have to
My head.
get out of our head, get the metaphor.
Which is what this moment is all about, sitting at home and having a nice quiet time,
Hmm.
drinking hibiscus from Egypt. It's
Uh-huh.
amazing what you can smuggle in a suitcase.
My Bolivian medicine man friend, after all of this started, he gave me a little bit of advice. He said what this was all about was it was a really golden opportunity for everyone to have the opportunity collectively to take the time out to uh, reflect
Yeah.
and reset. And I struggle with that because I don't like being told what to do, and I like to go wherever I please whenever I want.
Are you an Aries?
No,
Oh, okay.
I know a lot of Aries. I'm supposed to be a triple Libra, whatever that means. Uh, but I listened to his words and I thought, wow, yeah, this is a golden opportunity. It's tough to be in silence. I usually like it, and I'm pretty good at social distancing already. Being in my studio most of the time, but I really miss contact with others. That's seems like the most important thing for me that I miss. But I really took his words to heart, and I appreciate all this time, even though I don't like some of the consequences or ramifications.
Yeah.
I really appreciate the time that we're giving nature a little bit of quiet space, whether we like it or
Oh,
not,
yes.
the other way around.
I mean, look at the turtle population is breeding like crazy. I mean, for the first time, no, really, in Florida, they're saying the nesting is out of control. I mean, the turtles have a chance to survive.
Huh.
There are villages in Wales that have been taken over by goats. I'm not kidding you; it's quite funny.
Wow.
And I have a theory that the sheep are going to take over the world. It turns out it was the goats. I didn't see that one coming, but it's true. I mean, look at what's happening, especially on Earth Day that was yesterday. I mean, look at the chance that the Earth is having right now. It must be wondering, what did I do to deserve this? The pollution is down by 80%. You can actually smell the trees in downtown Portland, Maine. It's incredible. The noise level, the decibel level is so low that when we finally come out, and here in Maine, in the next week, we're supposed to be coming out of the lockdown. Um, I'm going to look at people and watch them observe how you've gone from a state of so much quiet and the cacophony will start building up again. And I think it's going to hit people really hard when they realize just how much noise is surrounded by. But nature, all of a sudden, is having a chance to really get back to itself. And I've also noticed it's unusually cold for this time of the year because we don't have that pollution reflecting the sunlight and trapping this heat down here. It's back to what it's supposed to be, and I won't be surprised if probably the ice pack on the north and south poles might be growing this year as a result of this month of just letting the Earth be for a change. And the Earth must be wondering, what did I do to deserve this wonderful moment of peace and quiet? So yes, it is true that good things are coming out of this, and it will give us a chance to reflect and maybe adapt and adjust. And we've seen a lot worse things. I mean, look at it historically. People before us, my grandparents had it far worse. I mean, they've gone through 2 world wars, revolutions, famine, plague, tuberculosis, and also influenza, the epidemic in 1917, I believe it was. Yes. So they survived all of that, and they survived motor cars and man landing on the moon. They didn't ever complain. They had no money. They were dirt poor. I lived with them for a whole year. It was the best year of my life. I learned so much about how to be resilient and how to survive when things got bad because they had no money. They were illiterate. We lived somewhere near the eastern border of Portugal with Spain. And I had to, if I wanted water, I had to go to the well to pick it up. I'd drop a bucket into a hole in the ground. I'd hoist it up, and that was my drinking water. And it was also the water that I had to bathe with. So you can imagine how cold that was. And there was nothing to heat the water with because we had no electricity. And you know what? I think about those days, I think, I'm glad I lived through that because we had nothing. My grandfather would have to go and shoot a rabbit for us to get food. Otherwise, you'd eat grass or whatever was lying by the side of the hill. And sometimes we had nothing else but put herbs into hot water, and that was soup. That was our evening meal. But you know what? It taught me a lot about survival, resilience, and how to work with what you have. Work with the environment around you because we do have things around us. Maybe not so much in the middle of a city, but if you live out in the countryside, there's lots of food if you know where to find it. Just a simple dandelion can give you so much. Just the way you cook the root or the flowers, that gives you, a lot of food for one evening. So we have a lot more to be thankful for that we give ourselves credit for.
Hmm. Yeah, I think the gratitude and perception seems to be the way to sort of keep an even kill.
I think so. A sense of perspective is a big thing. Not to get so caught out by the world around you. Think bigger. Think outside of yourself. That's usually the method of the initiate, is to approach these things. Like 25 years ago when I was just getting involved in this work. It'll be about me, about what I can get out of it. And now, hopefully, 25 years later, I can see the big picture. It's almost like I'm looking in on things, like being behind a glass pane and look at people doing things. And I'm kind of observing the world around me outside of myself. And I see, how can I work with this in a way that, people will also gain, but also that I will gain too, that I will survive. And you know what? It really makes a huge difference. Just being in that position of understanding the bigger picture and not succumbing to the fear. Fear is what gets everybody. Um, there's a great example that came from not too long ago, only 600 years ago, from the Knights Templar, who were following the same rules, by the way. They had huge problems on their hands. People are being burnt alive just by saying, I don't agree with that.
Hmm.
Or there was plague as well that was going on. And they ushered a renaissance in Europe. And the way they helped promote this was by looking at the old teachings. They were following the teachings of the Essenes, who essentially were following the teachings of the Japanese people in 8000 BC.
Oh,
Let that sink in for a second, okay?
right.
The
Yeah.
followings that Jesus and the apostles and the Essenes were teaching were nothing new. They were already 8,000 years old by the time they picked it up. So the Templars were following this very ancient tradition. And one of the things that they learned during their initiation, which they called the living resurrection, by the way, was to understand the big picture. Take yourself out of the picture, take your ego out of the picture, and look in on the event and look at the big scheme of things here. And one of the things that they learned was to master fear. So whenever they were rounded up and they were being tortured and being burnt alive, one of the things that I read that was quite shocking was how they were being wrapped up on a wooden pole. A wooden pyre is being built up around them, matches are being lit, and the flames are going up. And there was a big smile on their face. And they said, a moment of pain is nothing compared to the joy of everlasting life that I'm about to experience, because I can do a lot more work when my soul leaves the body and I can come back and help those that are still here. And most of them, being burnt alive, went to their deaths with a smile on their face saying, I learned how to control fear. I am not afraid of what's happening. I am transitioning from one moment to the next. I'm going to the room next door, is what the phrase was. And one moment of pain is nothing for the wonderful joy that I'm about to experience. And one of the last things that I remember their master Jacques de Molay saying is, I'm going to predict that the King of France will be dead in 4 months and the Pope in 8 months, because I know I can see the future already, and I'm going to make sure that things are working from the other side that will get you to go there unless you change your ways. Well, the King of France did not mend his ways. The Pope did not mend his ways. And guess what? within that time period, both of them are completely dead. And I thought, what a great moment in time where these people are teaching about the things that have been taught to people in India and Polynesia and Native America for thousands of years. Not to get caught up in the fear, not to get caught up in the moment, but observe the moment for what it is and go outside of yourself and see the bigger picture and not be afraid. What a great teaching. Simple, hard to master, by the way. Not everybody can do it. It takes people a moment or a lifetime to master this ability. But if you can just do it, it's worth it because you are in complete control. And that's the one thing that comes from all of these mystery teachings is learning to be in control of yourself, not having someone else control you, but you being in control of your situation, which obviously is very good for you, Robert.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I wanted to open it up for questions from other people to jump in and have a chance to connect with you. Melissa had a question, and I see that most of you have unmuted yourself. That's cool. That's perfect. If you had a question, maybe you could just take turns if someone wants to unmute themselves. Any questions?
So I did put a whole bunch of questions in the chat. Sorry to be, I'm just used to working online, working from home all the time for the federal government. So unfortunately, I don't have the time off. And I will tell you all that I'm very jealous and grateful at the same time. So, and please enjoy yourselves on behalf of all of us who are considered to be essential. My question for you, Freddy, is I just started your Missing Lands.
Oh, no, not that book.
Okay. Well, in order to prepare for the conference, actually, because before that, I read the Resurrection book and the Templar Nation. So
oh, my God, you're the one.
Obviously, I'm fast becoming your #1 fan. But one of the things I've been looking for quite some time because of my own journey is anyone to talk about Alpha Cygni, Deneb. And I had not seen it before just this moment. I was looking for something else that you were talking about in your index, and it said Deneb, and I said, oh my God. So I looked it up, and I wonder, did you go to Abydos on your recent trip? And if so, what can you tell me about what got channeled and what information, if you can share, came from the Cygnans? Because
the very information that you're reading is what came from my interactions with that temple.
okay.
I'd always asked whenever I went there, okay, why is the temple, if anybody's not familiar, Abydos is in Egypt. There's a temple on top, which is the historical temple, which was built by Seti I in 1300 BC. It's a beautiful temple. One of his sons eventually expanded it, Ramesses II, and it was always about him, his ego. I am Ramesses, I am so great, I'm going to chisel the story into the walls. It's like, oh, forget it. Let's just keep moving into the temple, into the spiritual part of the building. And then you go outside and you look down at the ground and you're faced with something alien because you have this monster of a temple underground. And it bears no resemblance to what's on top of the ground. And you think, where did that come from? That guy did not build that. I can tell you that. There's two different styles, completely different styles. And I always ask the same question, what is this doing here? Because it seems to me that when Seti was building his temple, which is perfectly aligned along the same alignment as the one underground, which is called the Assyrian, he obviously found it. It was already there. The two are obviously connected. But I figured it sounds to me like he built his temple on top of the Assyrian, and the weight of the stones cracked through the ceiling of what was under it, because you can tell because the ceiling's completely snapped. And then he had to build his temple. He took a left turn at Albuquerque, and you don't do that in temple building. I mean, it's a complete violation of temple protocol. You don't build the body and the legs and the pelvis and the heart, and then the rest, the throat and the third chakra goes that way. It's just not done unless you're forced to build in an L shape. And I wondered, wait a minute, this doesn't make, what was going on here? And how old could it be? And it was just during one of those moments where I paid quite a lot of money to go into the Assyrian by myself, as you have to do in Egypt with a bit of baksheesh. Always carry some baksheesh in your back pocket. And when everybody wasn't looking, one of the guards lets me in there. And they know me quite well there because I've been there so many times that I've become like one of their friends. And you just put your feet on the ground, and it's like this electrical shock just went up my spine. And I've been to a lot of temples, but I've never, ever had that experience. It's like I just suddenly woke up. I was like, whoa, whoever was in the body before this moment, he's gone. I'm somebody else. And it was that moment where I could see the stars. For one split second, I could see the original entrance in the stars and the fact that the temple was built on this alluvial plain. And I thought, oh, the temple was freestanding. It wasn't built in the ground. The mud has built up around it. And you make these notes very, very quickly because it happens in a fraction of a second. And this is what I mean about getting help from the other world and getting a help from the angels or the aliens. This is how it happens for me, because that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking to teach. So it's a flash in time where I could remember a lot of information, but it happened so quickly, and yet you can remember everything. And I began to write the stuff down like an idiot. Then it takes, of course, years to research because you have to go through the protocol. A lot of people that I write for, I know will believe anything I say, but I want to bring the skeptics into the fold. That's the hard part. That's what I have to do. I want to give them permission to believe that what I'm saying comes from a grounded source, not just from putting things together. And eventually it was about just sitting there and watching the connection to the star. And I couldn't figure out what the star was that the temple was aligned to. That was the hard part, because I kept thinking Osirian, Osiris, it has to be the Orion constellation. It's the two are connected. Osiris is the, let's say, the embodiment of the constellation of Orion. Could not figure it out. With all the software in the world, I could not figure out the alignment to the Orion. Seti's temple is not aligned to Orion either. And I figured that's a bit remiss of him. So what are they looking at? And it was one moment when I was with a group. In fact, we just did this again last month. And we were there with the group, and hardly anyone goes to this one chamber. It's right at the very end. It's the seventh chapel. You go right to the very end. It's the one little chamber right at the very corner. After you've taken all the photographs, you're not looking anymore. I'm thinking, this, my friends, is the most important fresco in the entire building. Why? Well, because it shows Seti as Osiris lying on his bier, okay, technically dead. And there's a bird floating over him. And I'm saying that bird is the key to the entire temple, because that is how I figured out how old the Osirian is. Seti was telling us this information on this wall in the one place where you're not going to find it, because in order to find the secret teachings, you have to work hard. They're not going to make it easy for you. You have to put the effort into it. And I said, that bird is Isis as a kite hawk. And I researched the kite hawk in ancient Egypt. And back then, the kite hawk related to Deneb, not today as we know it. Deneb is now described as the swan, or Cygnus is described as the swan. Well, that really only appeared kind of towards the Middle Ages and also around 2,000 years ago in the Middle East. That's a very modern thought. Originally in Egypt, the constellation of Cygnus was a kite hawk, and I figured, oh, so kite hawk, she is Isis, and she is the counterpart of Osiris, who is honored here in the Osirian. Well, what if the entire temple is about their union, it's about their story? Because in order to be resurrected, you have to marry the divine bride. And at that moment, there's this image that gets downloaded into my head showing the constellation rising in front of the Osirian. So I go downstairs, I pay more money, I take an alignment of the temple. I've got an exact alignment of 36 degrees. That's exactly what I need to know. What would I be looking at here 12,000 years ago, when I suspect that this was a freestanding temple and the Nile used to come right up to it, and it did. And at that moment, I found a newspaper clipping of some geological survey that was done showing that the temple, the mud around the Osirian, has been built up over 12,000 years. I went, bingo, thank you very much. The temple must be over 12,000 years old. Well, now you go back to your program. and you realign the stars at 12,000 years, and you look at the times when they're most proficient in the horizon, the spring equinox and the winter solstice. Those are the two markers in every culture in the world. And exactly before the sun rises on the spring equinox, I believe it's 10,500 BC, you see the Milky Way rising like a ladder that goes towards the stars. And I'm going, this can't be, it's too good to be true. And just before midnight, the constellation of Cygnus rises up the Milky Way like a ladder, like a tube to heaven, which is exactly the metaphor of the soul going to the place of souls to become regenerated, to come back as the risen initiate. Now, I couldn't have made that up without the help of the temple. And by putting that question, saying, what is this about? And be careful when you do that, because when you do that, the answer just comes back this way. So yeah, it's a great story, but I couldn't have done it without my interaction with that temple. But you see what I'm saying again, back to what I was saying earlier, it's what you're asking for in the temple is what's important. And let go of the expectation of the outcome, because if you're expecting something, you won't get it. Just let it go. Because your brain, once it gets involved, it leads you down dark passages. And a lot of the information ends up coming from you and your ego, and that's not a good place to go. Let it go. Let the expectation go, and then the magic happens. So it's a wonderful example, and thank you for pointing that out, of the interaction between a lonely individual and the temple and what came back.
Nice. Did you have any other questions, Melissa?
Boy, I just wanted to say thank you. I couldn't get off mute fast enough. Let's see. I guess the only other question I have was if you could please put the spelling of the French gentleman who wrote the pamphlet.
Oh, Pierre Mereux. Pierre is easy. Mereux is Merreaux.
Thank you.
And I believe he is referenced in the bibliography of that book. And if it's not in that book, it's in the Divine Blueprint. I wrote about his whole story in the Divine Blueprint. Yeah, if I get any skeptics hitting me with, this is absolute nonsense, well, you should read this guy's book, because he was a skeptic and he validated the reason why these temples are called the living, breathing monuments. And it's a pamphlet. It's not very thick. I think it's like, if I remember correctly, about 80 pages. It's not very big. And again, I found it in the back of a store selling plastic buckets in Carnac in France. And who would have known that the tourist shop would have given me so much enlightenment?
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And I thank you for all the work you do to help with skeptics, because I haven't had time to do that kind of work, and I encounter quite a number of skeptics.
Oh, yeah. The quackademics, as the late John Anthony West used to call them. There's some really ruthless people out there, I have to say. It takes someone without much, I want to say, they can switch off their compassion to deal with these people. And I can do it because I used to be in advertising for many years. I can just switch off if I want to, and just don't let it touch me on an emotional level, because you'll just shoot yourself in the head with the amount of anger that comes towards you. There's a guy that just wrote a really scathing review of The Missing Lands on Amazon, and I know who he is. He's not a nice person. He's obviously envious, he's jealous, and he's trolling Graham Hancock and Andrew Collins. And I'm going, oh, thank you. You just put me in the same group as my friends. And it's the same method of, character assassination, which the academics love doing, when they realize that we have, it's not because we're not challenging them. We're not saying that they're wrong. We're saying that the evidence does not hold up to scrutiny, and we're bringing new things to the forefront. And it's challenging these cherished theories, but that's what the whole point of science is about. A theory can only hold as long as the available evidence. What my point to the skeptics is, it's not that you were wrong, it's the fact that your theory was based on the available evidence. With new evidence that comes out every week, we have to refit the theory. And it doesn't matter if it comes from a secretary or the guy who brushes the dirt in the street, or me, or some academic. The fact is, facts are facts, and they can't handle that. And I thought it was different. I thought academics were much more open-minded, and you you know, you sit around like Greek people used to do around the table in a taverna and say, I want to discuss this argument today about this metaphysical thing. And you all add things in a very intellectual way, and you dismiss and you add, you take away, and you reach a consensus. But
Oh, rhetoric.
my God, these people are angry, vitriolic, and they go after you like tarantulas. So you have to develop a thick skin, and that's why I admire people like my friend Graham Hancock. He's done it well. In fact, he takes a lot of arrows for us. We like it that way because it means that we can get on with more work while he's taking up all the arrows, and he handles it really well. You know, he gets a lot of credit from me. I don't always agree with him, but that's not the point. The point is he's done a lot of work and he's blazed the trail for all of us. So well done, Graham.
I had the same experience when I went to college. I actually dropped out of college because I was shocked at how little academic and intellectual freedom and autonomy, there was. That it was very straitjacketed, and it was actually very heartbreaking to me. And it took me years to reground myself and go, okay, I'm going to go to college to earn money and forget about intellectual and academic freedom and just figure out a way to earn money. But saying that, I am a skeptic, and it's really important to differentiate between skeptics and debunkers. Yeah. And I sent you a few questions in private because I didn't want to interrupt your discourse. I thought it was really important and interesting. But as you can see by my questions, I'm asking for evidence. And so I think it's important that people do look for evidence. And I think that rather than just, I channeled the material. I personally have a great deal of difficulty with people who use channeled material as their source of information. Partly because maybe it's out there, but I've never heard of a channel who ever predicted 9/11.
I do.
Oh, okay.
I'm part of that group.
Good. Who predicted 9/11? Is there a way I have access to a good library of material of metaphysical material?
I have to keep confidence on it. I've been asked to keep confidence about it.
Okay.
For a lot of reasons. One, to do with the fact that every time any psychic usually warns the police about an incoming problem, they end up being part of the investigation.
Right.
And you can see how that works.
Right.
Yeah, how do they have foreknowledge of someone dying? Well, they must have been involved in some way, and they make their life hell. So I have to maintain that confidence. But yeah, we knew about the tsunami in Indonesia as well. And I said, why can't we mention this? I said, and the source said, because sometimes not bad things, just the detrimental things have to happen to wake up a greater percentage of the population. And if you look again, the big picture, that we all agree to be part of something, okay? People actually agree to die on Earth in order to show others how not to behave.
Well, we all agree to die on Earth, so.
But you know what I'm saying? It's like we agree, we choose to our path in life, and some people agree to be part of a detrimental event in order to show others how to move forward. And I figured I kind of like that, because you take responsibility for what you do here and for the events, not the events influencing you, but you are part of that event. And a lot of things that we've got through the group have had to allow to happen in order for other things to move forward. And I know sometimes it sounds difficult to accept, but the way I look at these things, I see how things have evolved in a very positive way out of negative states. Sometimes that's what.
What's the positive that's come out of 9/11?
The discourse on showing that the whole point of hating the West, hating the Arab world, comes down to lack of understanding. That's one of the things. And it's woken people up to saying this whole thing about East, West, and Christian and Muslim really comes from a lack of listening, from a lack of understanding. That's one of the things I've learned from it. Yeah. That we basically are attacking each other, despite the fact that we tend to really worship the same thing. We just call things by different names. It's really as a religious view. And also it goes back into a deeper level. This is where it gets into kind of a deep state thing, which I don't want to go into. It goes back to the fact that the only people that flew out of the country on that day was the bin Laden family. And that should tell you a lot about what was going on at the time between the people. The bin Laden family were contractors to the Bush administration. There was apparently, from what I understand from government sources, that there was a deal that they reneged on, that the Bush administration reneged on a huge deal, and this was payback. I have to say, I don't agree with that at all.
Never heard that before.
Never agree with the payback. You don't kill people because of a payback, but that's their thing. And it's to do with things that we are not privy to in the ordinary world. These are contracts between governmental and political factions where someone breaks the deal and then someone pays back. And unfortunately, it's ordinary people who lose their lives. That's the local effect. But the bigger effect is the lack of understanding between cultures. And a lot of people have been woken up to that, to realize maybe I should know more about the Muslim culture. What was their problem? Well, the problem is it goes back to the Crusaders, and before that, it goes back to the Seljuk Turks that used to overrun the Christian centers. And before that, you have to go back deep into history to look at where we are now. You know, if you want to look at the cause of where we are today, look back 3,000 years ago of what was happening in the Middle East, and there you see where the trouble begins. So again, it's about understanding the big picture about how we need to talk more and understand each other, where we come from, and respect those differences. Otherwise, an eye for an eye, as the man said, only makes the world blind.
Makes the world blind, yeah.
Yeah.
So actually,
I miss Gandhi. He had the best quotes.
The real question I wanted to ask, I just kind of threw that in at the end about debunkers, because there's a difference between debunkers and skeptics. I consider myself a skeptic. But the question I wanted to ask you in your research is, you're going back to 11,500, but I've seen evidence to go back to 70,000 years or even 300,000 years. And I'm wondering if you have any expertise in that area, and if those were entities that you would consider humans.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And in fact, if I won't even give you an opinion, I'll give you what the indigenous people have always said, that there was a parallel culture living alongside Neanderthals for a long, long time. No one can keep track. Even Aboriginal people talk about events that happened 1 million years ago, which means they must have been here 1 million years ago to witness the falling of a rock in the middle of the outback. That's just been proved recently. There are geologists that said, let's look at the Aboriginal stories. They talk about a meteorite that came out of the sky, and they reckon it landed over there, but there's nothing there. Well, they dug up the area, and they found the meteorite. But the meteorite landed 1 million years ago. So how did they know unless they had seen the thing landing? So I'm a great believer that, yes, we've been here cycles upon cycles upon cycles. Can you prove it? It's very hard to, because the way that geology works on Earth, erosion takes away the evidence. That's why the archaeologists don't want to talk about this. There is no evidence for them. But how come the stories talk about, for example, the Sumerian king list tracks 140,000 years? Now, you could say, okay, maybe they were using the moon as a calendar. Okay, but that still doesn't add up to 140,000 years. Well, maybe it's the Sophic cycle with Sirius, which the Egyptians used, but that's still a lot of years. The king list, the official king list of Egypt, which is written in the Turin Papyrus, it goes back to 36 or 39,000 BC, depending on your points, your starting point. So I'm a great believer that, yes, we've been here before. There are human footprints walking alongside dinosaur footprints in Texas. They've not been made up, they're there. You can see them with your own eyes. So I do believe that there have been cultures upon cultures among cultures, and the Indian people, the Tamil culture of southern India, have been writing about this forever. There's one great story in the Rig Veda, one of the books in the Rig Veda. Most academics will say, okay, it's only 300 BC. Okay, let's say that's correct, that the Rig Veda was written around 300 BC. Now, they talk about the academies, the Sangams, which is the Sangams. They're literally academies of mysticism, like we have a university. And each Sangam was 4,000 years in essence. There were 5 Sangams times 4,000 years. Now, that's already 20,000 years. of history. So the Rig Veda has been rewritten again and again and again and again. Like, a book is caught up in a fire. Someone picks up what's left of the book and rewrites the book. Now, that doesn't mean that the book is only a year old. That means that a book that you just copied may be thousands of years old. And the Rig Veda is the same way. They talk about these sangams, these academies, which were 4,000 years each, and all of them succumbed to encroachments of the ocean. In other words, they're now under the sea. And as we've already found, one of them is off the city of Dwarka, which is now 15 miles out under the Indian Ocean. One of them is off Mahabalipuram, and I love saying that word because it makes me feel good. Mahabalipuram. Another one is off the present city of southern India, which is called, I can't remember the name of it, but all of those stretch all the way down beyond Sri Lanka, under the Indian Ocean. And according to what's written in the Rig Veda, they must be at least 20,000 years old, because there was four academies, 5 academies, 4,000 years each. So we're talking about a long period of time. And if you read what they talk about in the Rig Veda, about flying machines and about the gods going from A to B with these luminous craft that took out entire cities in the blink of an eye, well, we're talking about technology, we're talking about a heightened state of culture. Yeah. And if these people, according to the theological and academic argument, were so primitive when they wrote this, in the let's say in 3000 BC, if they were that primitive, how did they come to write so well? How they had this incredible imagination of flying craft and this technology and these wonderfully developed scenarios and greatly developed people and their relationships to their patrons and to their elders. Well, that's not the sign of a backward civilization. That's not a sign of an advanced culture, having written this probably from an eyewitness account. I mean, that's how I see it. And the Egyptians are the same way. They're talking about one of my favorite books, which is really hard to get hold of. In fact, it'll cost you $600 just to find this. It's called the Edfu Building Texts. And I actually have a copy of it. And I can't spend enough time on it, because it tells you about the exploits of the gods when they first arrived in Egypt around 10,800 BC. And it talks about the land where they came from that was slowly being subdued by the encroaching ocean. So the sea level was rising, and then the earth was hit by meteorites, and that forced them to go to Egypt. And around about 10,500 BC, there is evidence and proof that suddenly there's a massive agricultural civilization. Out of nowhere, suddenly there's a sudden agricultural revolution, and no one can explain it. Well, if you read the Edfu texts and relate it to what was happening around the Nile, the two go together. Humans were given agricultural technology around exactly the same time. So they went from complete barbaric culture to, oh, we can cultivate wheat and barley and do some great things, boom. And then it develops into the culture that they have today. So there is evidence to show that around the world, if we just listen to the indigenous stories, that we've been here for a long, long time. And we will be here for a long, long time. We're not going anywhere.
Else with some questions?
I'm glad an answer for all these people. Oh, and by the way, our group, the channel group, there's a question that always pops up. Can you use this group and your special power to win the lottery? And I can say, yes, we have figured out the winning lottery numbers 3 times, and yes, 3 times in a row. The powers that be had stopped us from playing the numbers by distracting us at the very last minute when you're about to go and get a ticket. Something always happens that stops you from buying the damn ticket. And so far, we're keeping a tally on this. We have won and lost $153 million.
Wow.
It's become such a joke that we now use it as one of those jokes at parties when people say, can you use your predictive ability to win the lottery? I said, you tell them the story. I'm too sick to even calculate how much we've lost so far. It's quite funny. So it just shows you that you've come here to be purposeful It's not my purpose in life to win the lottery and become stinking rich. It's my purpose to be here as a struggling author.
How about you, Ryan? Did you have a question?
I don't have a direct question right now, but this is amazing to be a part of. I didn't realize it was going to be such an intimate group and be able to interact like this. Freddie, I was actually just in Egypt for the first time. It was February 14th through like March 6th, and I got to go to, I had no less than 21 tickets to ancient sacred power spots. I rented the Great Pyramid. I went out there originally to take a biogeometry class, which I did, a foundation level, put on by Dr. Ibrahim Karim. If you've heard of him, that teaches that. And so
Yeah.
It's been a blink since I've kind of transitioned from a career in real estate into this interest of spiritual energies and otherwise. But just since December, honestly, over the last year, I've really been working on transformational work and getting more into this. But anyways, I've decided to transition my career to focus on something. I haven't quite yet developed it. I'm going to spend some time doing that, but maybe in the future we could collaborate in some way, and I could reach out to you, maybe through Robert, through email, and just make a connection. So.
Yeah, it's that's always the hardest part. If I have friends who are still in advertising that keep asking me this every year, it's like, you lucky bastard, you've managed to make a successful transition. And I say, well, it has not been easy. I have to say, it's but the fringe benefits have been wonderful. I wouldn't swap it for anything. But yeah, you have to take a leap of faith sometimes. The time is always right. And you know when the time is right, when you've had enough. And you wake up one day and you think, you know what, I'm just not doing what I really want to do. My heart isn't in this. I'm having to do this for a living. And yeah, you got to be practical. You got to make a living. But sometime the powers that be are pushing you, and all your spirit guides are pushing you so hard, saying, you came here to do something else. It's time to get your ass out of bed and take a leap of faith. And that's kind of what happened to me. I mean, I had a very successful career in advertising. I have awards, I have billboards and TV ads and stuff like that. And you know what? I was thoroughly miserable. I wasn't doing something that really brought joy to my life, and I couldn't really see, apart from the work that I did for charity, which I loved doing. We made lots of money for charity, which is great. And but one day I just woke up and said, this is not who I am. I want to go and look at pyramids. I want to go look at crop circles and look at big standing stones and find out, how can I make a living doing this? Because this is where my passion is. And at that moment, the moment I said that, how can I make a living doing this? It's like something happened. It's like I was given this little bait, and I won't go into much into personal details, but there was a bait that was thrown at me that was so incredible that I went, oh yes. And it really meant having to leave countries. I mean, I had to leave America. I sold everything. I had to get a divorce. I moved back to England, and my whole life went completely upside down. And I tell you, fear at that moment kicks in, because I went bankrupt. I've got a best-selling book that's just come out, and I'm broke. I've lost everything that I've worked for, but I'm 40. I have a chance to rebuild, and at that moment, you realize, what the F have I done? I had a lovely house by the ocean. I have sports cars. I had pussycats. I've given it all up to look at trampled crop in the middle of a field. But you know what? At that moment, when you just let it go and you follow your heart, and you know that something's going to come out of this, you're not sure what it is, but you go, you know what? I have faith in something. And I had enough experiences, luckily enough. I was actually levitated in the middle of a crop circle. Who would have thought that that was possible? I didn't. I wasn't asking for that. I wasn't asking for a spiritual experience. I just wanted to find out, what are these flattened areas of crop all about? Boom, someone got my address, and they got me into the middle of all of this big mess. And I wrote a book on it. But that experience alone helped me to understand what I'm doing today, because I realized I'm being guided by something that I can't touch, but I sense it all the time. And I'm going to go and follow it through, because my passion is to leave the world a better place than I found it, and become a better person as well. I mean, you got to be selfish about it. Otherwise, why are you here? But I see the benefit that has come out of people enjoying the work that I do, and I see the change that it's done for them, and it keeps me going. And every year I look at the screen and I go, it's going to be another tough year. A lot of traveling, not a book. People are buying less books, and they want free books, and then they want to read stuff on Kindle, which means I only get $6 a book, and you can't survive on that. And no one buys DVDs anymore because they've thrown their DVD players away. So now you've got to download stuff, and you get $10 less per copy. So I think, I'm sure it'll work out well this year. And by December, the numbers are in the black, and I'm going, well, that was another year I didn't have to worry about. But I'm just following a passion, and that's what I'm saying to you. You have to sometimes just put everything aside and go, I'm going to let go of all my fear. I'm going to follow my passion, and it's going to be bloody hard, but it's going to work out okay. And you know what? Magically, it just does. That doesn't mean you get ungrounded and you lose track of your focus because you've got to pay the bills. That comes part and parcel. So keep track of the bills, keep track of things which are practical, but just let go of expectation and just follow that heart. It'll get you there. I don't know how it works. It just does, and here I am 20 years later. I haven't stopped touring in 20 years. And you know what the joke is? I wanted to be a rock star. I had the guitar. I had the hair. Who would have thought that the rock that I was promoting would be large upright stones? I just had it. My ego wanted to be on the stage doing what Freddie Mercury did and have 8,000 armpits looking at you when you struck a note on your guitar. It turns out it was about rocks. I just had the ego and the soul were in two different locations, and it took a while to figure out, actually, no, I want to go over there. Because, people say, I hear this all the time, it's like, I really like listening to the lectures and the fact that you're passionate when you're on stage. But, and I said, you know what, 20 years ago, you could not get me in front of people. I'm very shy. I don't like being the center of attention, and I still don't. But you put me on the stage and I get to talk about what I love doing, and 2 hours have gone by and I have no idea what's happened. But that's what I mean. Your passion takes over. Once you start doing what you're supposed to be doing, you're happy doing it. And that's when it's effortless. It's difficult, but it's effortless. And at the end of the day, you go to sleep and you go, that was a good day's work. I'm really proud of what I just did. So that's my best advice for you. Just wait for the right moment. And then just watch the signs and just go for it. Like the Dalai Lama said, approach love and cooking with reckless abandon. And I think that comes for your passion as well.
Thank you. Thanks for the words.
Oh, my pleasure.
Anyone
Robert,
else?
are you still there?
I'm still here.
Robert, Freddie,
Hello.
thanks a lot for sharing your wisdom. You're awesome. Want to get that across. I'm very interested in the seeds that, I've read a lot of stuff by Levin Good and some of the stuff that you talked about. And I've hung out with
William.
And I always thought it was just the crop circles. I came the backwards route from you. Now I know the stones do it too. So I'm curious about, I'm a scientist, so I believe in better ways of growing crops. Maybe we could work on, not you and I, but humanity, work on using these seeds to our benefit. Things like Monsanto have collapsed. The way that we've been doing things aren't working. The fossil fuel needs and all for our crops. What do you think about trying to get these seeds going for humanity, for everybody?
I'm trying to remember who the gentleman. He's passed away. He was part of Levin Good's group. It was Burke, John Burke. He wrote a very good book, very mechanical, but very good in its outcome. I think it's called Seed of Knowledge, and I quote it regularly. And he was the one that originally was working on the seeds experiments with the crop circles with Levin Good in Michigan. And he went on to make the logical leap that the cross-reference between crop circles and ancient temples, because they're one and the same thing. They're built exactly on the same platform. And he, I believe, developed a company that also developed this, I like your dog. He developed a company whereby they created a little gizmo that generated the same frequencies that they found on top of the Chichen Itza pyramid to do seed development. So you might want to start there. I haven't kept track of it because I've got my fingers in so many pies that I lose track of things. But I would start there and see how they've evolved. Because they're both now passed away, so might need a bit of research to get you there.
Thank you very much. Awesome.
My pleasure. And I also actually, I just thought of something. Oh, look at them, you little rascal. I wonder also whether there's a relationship between what we just said and Masaru Emoto. And the use of prayer on seas, because we talk about prayer with water, and we've obviously seen how intent shapes the thought in water, in the shape of water. What would happen with the same electromagnetic impulse with seeds? I don't think that's a huge leap of imagination. And I wonder if someone's tried it and they've had results. Now that's worth looking at. I think we just come up with a new idea here.
Yeah.
At least I hope it's a new idea.
Yeah, Pedro, the Bolivian medicine man I was speaking of, he said when he was a kid, the grandfather taught them to put them in the mouth first before planting them. And that by actually putting them in your mouth, you're activating your DNA through that seed to tell that seed what kind of nutrition you need.
Oh, nice. Which means you should be very centered in yourself before you do that. Because if your girlfriend just walked out on you the night before and you put that in the door, that's not going to work out well. But no, that's a very good idea, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I'd hate to see his mouth after 50,000 seeds in one day.
Well, there's another way to do it. I've been planting my own starters, so I just put a little spit into the dirt, and then I put the seeds into the dirt instead of trying to put every seed in my mouth.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Oh, you just started this year, have you?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
We'll have to have a show and tell.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah, I think we have so many of these techniques. And if you just, I mean, I travel a lot around the world and I always love to hear indigenous people talk about their stories. And it goes back to the days when I was growing up with my grandparents in the middle of nowhere. They had the best stories, and the folklore is full of wonderful stories of remedies like this. Like, again, going back to our present situation, people were asking me about what can I do to prevent, coronavirus. I said, well, you can't prevent it. It's a virus. It's part and parcel of Earth. You just have to look after your temple. And I said, for my thing, I mean, I'm not a doctor or anything, but I know that camphor is especially good because camphor goes right through your track. It cleans up everything in your nasal passages, your throat, your lungs. The irony is it came from China. And they use that during the plague as well to keep your respiratory system active. And I actually put a bit of Vicks Vapor Rub up my nose a few days a week, just for fun. Because, in the old days, before the kids discovered that by smearing Vicks Vapor Rub on your chest and going on a rave, not that I do that kind of thing, but I know people who do. I'm getting on a bit now, But the kids who do the raves, they smear the Vicks Vapor Rub on their chest, and you've got 800 kids in a disco, and the heat goes up, and once the hit hits a critical mass, the Vicks Vapor Rub turns to a hallucinogenic. And I figured, oh, well, what was the main ingredient of Vicks Vapor Rub? It was camphor, and they used to have 20% or 25% in the old days. Well, now the lawyers told them to take it out. You get 9%. So what I do, boys and girls, is I get a little tub of Vicks Vapor Rub. I take out a third of that petroleum jelly, and I'm trying to find another carrier for that jelly, which is not really good for you, but it works for now. And I'll put in a whole massive thing of pure camphor oil, put it in there, pure eucalyptus as well, just for fun. Mix it around with your finger, and you put a couple of lugs up your nose, and I guarantee a great night's sleep. And so far, I have not been affected by the virus. I mean, I feel pretty good. And that just came from Egypt and England. I mean, I've been through we've had some of the worst death rates in England, and I'm fine. I've obviously got the antibody, and I think that that's part of the system that I use to keep myself clean. Is that keeping the respiratory system completely clean and healthy with camphor, and also. Nutmeg and cloves are also pretty good for keeping that analgesic and respiratory system going. And also a bit of alcohol as well. I find that a bit of high-level cognac, like, 1786 Remy Martin, that kind of, what the hell is that? Well, if that's your thing, or Gentleman Jack, if you're from Tennessee, that's also very good. Yeah, that's a little bit of alcohol cleans up and purges everything in the evening, a little snifter in the evening, watching a good movie. Simple things like that. Turmeric is also very good for you. All the remedies we need are all there within our reach, So hopefully that will work for you as well. It certainly kept me going. And the other thing is, whenever I found people coughing on my tours, and this happened in the Andes last November, there was at least 4 people that arrived with the bug. And of course, I don't want to get the bug because I'm talking for a whole week. And I bring the tub of Vicks with me. I just chuck it down the bus. I said, just stick this up your nose and pass it along. And you know what? I began to realize why my tours are so popular and they sell out pretty quickly, because the word got out. Everybody's high on Vicks Vapor Rub in my tour groups. 2 days later, no one is affected with the cold or the flu in my tour. And the whole bus reeks of camphor and everybody's very happy. So I can't recommend this on air for legal reasons, but you know what I'm saying.
Anyone else has some questions for Freddy?
Or
remedies or answers? Questions or answers?
Freddy, I got the hammer in the medicine kit is lobelia.
Which was?
Lobelia for the lungs.
Oh, I've never heard of that.
Oh my gosh. It's very serious, but my daughter had asthma and I gave her a teaspoon of tincture of that and she never had asthma again.
Really?
I thought that was an English medicine ingredient in cough medicine and stuff.
How do you write it?
Lobelia is Lobilia, I think.
I'm gonna have to look into this.
Yeah.
Wow, so it's a plant.
But the camphor is really good. Thanks for that.
Oh, it smells good. I'm definitely going to look into lobelia. Yeah, if it was good enough for them during the plague, it'll be good enough for us. And I do believe that there was a song, "Ring Around the Roses, a pocket full of posies, tissue, tissue, we all fall down." That pocket full of posies is what kept the plague away. It was a plant extract. And it's kind of funny because I walked into my library a few weeks ago, and I heard a group, the mothers usually bring their children to the library and they start singing this song. And I said to the librarian, do the parents realize they're teaching them a song about the plague? And the librarian said, best not to remind them. It's a wonderful moment where people are just innocently repeating something without realizing what they're actually teaching the kids. But it's a great reminder in the nursery rhyme of how people beat the plague. Who would have known?
Any other questions before we wrap it up with Freddy?
I have one last one, if it's okay, if no one else has one.
Absolutely. What do you do for local government, by the way?
I work for the Department of Veterans Affairs, and I'm an IT program manager for their healthcare system. I oversee the VA healthcare system, one of many people.
Oh, well done.
Yeah,
well done.
Thank you. And I'm also what my passion is, and I thank you so much for what you said about the leap of faith, because I'm very close. I'm very, I'm doing my best to continue to serve, but I've been there for 20 years. And 5 years ago, I became a Reiki master and have been doing a lot of clear channeling. That's just where they're taking me. So God willing, off I go into the wild blue yonder.
Yeah, it's a big leap, but if you know what you're doing, and you have to be practical at the same time. In fact, and to answer my friend earlier on about the channel material, it really depends who your source is and what experience you've had with them. I'm the same way. And by the way, a skeptic is someone who doesn't draw a conclusion. That's the original meaning of skeptic. Not many people know that. It depends on who the channel source is, and I've been very lucky. I have some of the best friends who've been some of the best psychics in the world, and the information that we got is extraordinary. In fact, a couple of the books that I've written have really been written to validate the information that I got from them, and I don't tell that to many people.
Right.
I have to go and look at the foundation which to back that up with, and it's all there. So yeah, it depends what your source is and what your experience is, but please carry on.
Well, so far I have a very similar process, but when I go to validate, I'm finding that others have already done the hard work, such as your good self. So thank you, because you've provided a ton of validation for stuff I've gotten. And I do all my channeling after invoking Reiki, which is from the light.
Yeah.
So that way I have automatic protection that everything I'm getting comes from the light. And when I astral travel and go through the astral plane, where it can be a little, couple tricksters out there and whatnot, I've learned
just a few.
I've learned how to navigate through there pretty quickly. So I'm very thankful for that. And you're right, having a good teacher is a big deal. But what I wanted to ask you is if you have ever heard of or seen any other temples that are aligned to Deneb. It's very important to me.
Oh yeah, not offhand. It hasn't been a focus of my attention. I know Andy Collins has done a bit of work on that. I don't always agree with him though. Like Göbekli Tepe, he makes a big connection between that and Deneb. I don't think he's right on that one, because the Deneb is going down into the horizon, and ancient cultures never ever celebrated the going down of the constellation because the energy's gone. They celebrated the rise of the midheaven position. So Orion is again, and Vega are very prominent at that time in the thing. But I haven't read his dissertation fully yet. I got so many books that people send me, I never get around to reading them. But I will probably go there to see what he's done, because that's one of his big things.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, I've been looking.
Again,
it's rare to see anything about it so far.
I mean, there was a big resurgence in the Middle Ages with Deneb and also Cygnus through the Templars and the Rosicrucians. That was their symbol of the divine virgin, the swan. And you usually see images of a beautiful woman painted, and she's holding a swan. I said, why is she holding a swan? Why not a dove or a more practical bird? I mean, the swan might just bite her. She's not going to do well out of this. And you go, oh, because it developed into the shape of the swan. And I believe it was the Greeks that began to reshape the constellation into the way we know it today. But in very, very old times, it was actually the kite hawk. So that's where I would go with that research.
I did not find that in your Templar book, and that's very interesting to me. I read the whole.
I found that later.
You did? Okay, that's really, really interesting to me, because that resonates a great deal. Thank you so much.
Yeah, the Templar book has got everything in the kitchen sink in there. You could not make that book any thicker if you could try. I get hate mail. It's like, I can't believe I just had to read that. I said, yeah, wait till you get to the references. There's 800 of them. My brain has not been the same after I wrote that.
It's a beautiful book.
I could not put any more in there. It was ridiculous. It's 15 years of work.
I read it from cover to cover, and I keep having to go back, and between this and some Lawrence Gardner stuff and some other stuff, it's amazing.
And then you got to take aspirin or take up heavy drinking.
There may have been some red wine involved to just ground after reading it, because I was usually way out there.
It's a big story. My God, I had to write it like a play in order to make sense of it, because there's so many different timelines interweaving, and you don't know where the hell you're going. And it's also an antidote. It's my way of sticking a middle finger up. The modern society that relies on cell phones, we've given our power away to these little black things. And today we're wondering why we're all taken up by, I'm not talking about fake media by the way that the president frames it, but by the way of fake information, propaganda. People are just believing it, the first thing that comes up on their feed, and not questioning it. It was my antidote to say, you've got to sit down. If you want to get good information about anything, and I'm not just about my book, any book, you've got to sit down and be patient and read a source that's been well researched. It takes effort. It takes concentration. And that's why I wrote it that way, because you have to concentrate. If you don't concentrate, you've lost track of the story.
Well, and prima facie evidence. So, yes,
Yeah.
all for it.
It's like I don't buy any books unless the bibliography is that thick. 'Cause they may not be right, but they've done the homework. That's important. You've got to do the homework. Whether you agree with it is not important. The fact is they've done the homework. So if the bibliography is about that thick, I think, nah, forget it. If it's full of internet references, forget it. It's got to be, it's got to be chunky, and then at least you're on a pretty solid foundation.
What a wonderful privilege to be able to go into those old libraries and hold those documents. It's just beautiful.
And the best part is everybody's chucking away their books on eBay, especially hardcovers.
Oh.
And I have a laundry list of books that I've always wanted to have in my library, which are hardcover, because it makes you look more intelligent when people come for dinner. You've got paperbacks, and you think, he's got paperbacks, but if you've got hardcovers, you think, he's intelligent. So I'm slowly going down the list of my hardcover books, which cost like $60, and people are throwing them away for $1 on eBay, and I'm going, click, buy, and then I give my soft covers to charity. So thank you for everybody who's throwing away all your books. Oh, and records as well. I collect albums, so I'm having a great time on eBay.
That's a great idea. Thank you. I'll definitely be perusing it later this evening.
Especially ones that aren't printed anymore, because, they're not printed. They're no longer around.
No, they change printing sometimes as well. I was looking for a copy of, oh gosh, it's escaped me now, but something that's along the lines of, $700 or $800 to get all 12 volumes. I think it's something about the Kabbalah. It's the original, oh gosh, it was put together in the Middle Ages, and the Zohar, I think it is. Yeah. And I was looking for that, and I'm like, oh, but there's that part where it's $700 in the translation. So maybe someone on eBay will have it for
just got to pick
$5.
Exactly. Or Secret Teachings of All Ages by Annie Hall in hardcover in Gravure. I was fortunate enough to touch it and smell it. There was a publisher that lived down the road from me years ago. They went out of business, and it was behind a glass case. And they said, well, we'll let you open it just this once. You can't touch it. You can only smell it. I was able to just, and they opened it for me. It's in 5-color printing, and I'm going, how much? $980. Okay, that means I have to sell 8,000 books. But
I have a copy that was handed down by the women in my family. So yes, I do.
You've got the hardcover.
I do. It's huge. It's like a.
Really?
I have to put on my glasses and get a magnifying glass to read everything, but it's amazing, and it has all the leaves. It's a beautiful book. It was. And what's priceless about my copy is that both my mother and my grandmother wrote in the margins. And they're both, of course, gone at this point. So it's, it's a reconnection.
Oh, yeah.
And there's so much information in there. Boy, he was really on the front lines of divulging the mysteries, which really, if I may, just it seems like what you're doing, and it's important.
Well, he's giving you the tidbits. The way that the mystery schools work is that they give you the bait. Right. And then once you get curious, they'll go, let's tell you a bit more. Let's flush out this particular story. Yeah, he's just giving you a little bit of an inkling of what he's allowed to say, because the rest requires, work, time, effort. He's just giving you the bait. That's what I love about his stuff. It just gets you excited enough to learn more. Yeah, I've got about 4 of his books.
Did you ever get to the point in your life where you had so much bait in your coffee jar that you just had to pull out a piece and go fishing? I mean, that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm like, oh my God, there's so many gifts, and which one do I pick? And they just keep coming. It's
well, back in the 90s when I was starting out, I was trying to figure out if I was going to ditch my high-paying career and go into a career of not sure what the hell I'm doing. And I'm probably going to lose my marriage over it, and I did. I would buy and read anything that wasn't nailed to the shelf. I think everybody's done this. You just like, oh, that's interesting, oh, that's interesting. And after a while, you become much more discerning. That's when you realize you've made progress. When you discern, you go, actually, that wasn't quite brilliant. There's a paragraph in that book that's actually really good. The rest is rubbish.
Yeah.
Then you get experience, and you go, that's complete nonsense. And then you become really selective. And it's funny when you go back 20 years and you go, okay, I've really progressed a lot now knowing what I know. But you know what? Someone will give me a book or I'll read something else and I go, I know so little. And that's when you know you still have so much progress to make. And it humbles you because you realize that you really don't know that much. You know a lot, but you don't know that much. And that's what I like about this. It keeps you grounded in a way because there's no end to the mystery. Someone will say something like today, with Lobelia, that's got me excited about that. I don't know everything, and that keeps me fresh all the time. And that's what's interesting about it. You don't get caught up in your own ego, which is important because you can develop a huge ego with this stuff. And I've seen people whose names I will not mention who are very famous, and they're always on the lecture circuit. And most of them are full of nonsense, just based on my experience of subjects that I know well that they know. Said, no, it's absolute nonsense. What you're actually talking about is the complete opposite of the truth. From my direct experience. So you've got to follow your own path. And it takes a lot of time and courage, but you start becoming much more selective in what you read after a while. And recognizing that's when you realize you've made progress. But life is about progress. It's not about perfection. If we were perfect, we wouldn't have incarnated in the first place.
Well, there's so much of it that for me, I just find the whole thing very humbling because of what you said. I mean, there's so much that you are given. It is a banquet, and that in and of itself is just humbling. Just that knowledge that there is a banquet.
Exactly.
Wow.
Never-ending food, which for a taurine is very exciting. Nibble at this and nibble at that. The trick is, it's like, the trick is to sort of just grease the wheels, not to over oil. You can overdose on this stuff, and then you lose control. You lose sight of reality after a while, and that's also the complete opposite.
Yeah, no, I'm not allowed to do that. I have some grown children in a home and a dog, so I'm not allowed to. I can't. I have to stay tethered, and that's okay. I think it's
sell them on eBay. Just
yeah. I don't know. They're too priceless. Yeah, I'll trade you for the Zohar.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Any last questions before we wrap it up?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I know you.
Yeah, thank everyone for tuning in, and thank you again, Freddie, so much.
Thanks, everybody. It's like being at the pub with your aunts and uncles.
Except we're more polite.
That would be dangerous.
Thank you, Robert, so much for hosting this. What a beautiful time, and so looking forward to the actual event and everything in between.
Yeah, thank you. Right on. I've been enjoying getting it reorganized because that means I get to talk to all the speakers and hang out with them a little bit more. But yeah, we have some good things planned. The next live stream or the next Zoom meeting actually is going to be with Randall Carlson. We're just fixing up the date. It's probably going to be either for next Tuesday or Wednesday.
Oh, good.
But I'll get a message out to you guys soon. And then we'll be preparing everything for the live stream, which is going to be just as cool, if not cooler.
Excellent. Thanks, Robert.
Yeah. Right
Thanks,
on.
everybody.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Be well, stay healthy, and drink heavily.
Hey, Freddie, before you go, you asked me last time what that whiskey was. I didn't know the. Oh, you can't read it. It's backwards.
That name sounds ridiculous.
That's kind of why I got it. It kind of looked like an outlaw type thing, you know?
That's pretty funny. You know, there's a funny story. Years ago when I was in London, I was still a rock and roller, and I was in a band, and I was just getting into the design industry, and I had long hair. And I went out for dinner with a couple of American friends. My wife was Canadian. And I said, look, I'll buy, since you're in London, I'll buy you a drink. And I said, no, it's my thing. I don't mind. I said, all right, I'll have a double Jack. Neat. Wow, you really like Jack Daniels? Yeah, I mean, I keep 2 cases at home. There's only 2 things that ever go up in price: property and booze. So I figured I'm going to drink it. You know, it's always fun having a bottle of Jack Daniels on your Marshall amp when you're on stage. So I might as well just buy a couple of cases. It's going to go up next year. I'll save myself a lot of money. He goes, wow, I'm going to take down your address. You'll be hearing from us. Who do you mean us? I am the marketing director of Jack Daniels Europe. I went, so you'll be hearing from us. And I did. I got a letter back a week later from the head of the Jack Daniels Distillery Company in Lynchburg, Tennessee, population 988. They're very proud of that fact. And they said, dear Mr. Silva, we have heard that you've become a purveyor of art, Tennessee style, and we've decided to make you an honorary, wasn't a member, an honorary fellow of the Jack Daniels Distillery Company. I went, what? And we have given you a plot of land. Here's the title deed. And they gave me a title deed in the Jack Daniels Brewing Company. Plot number, and we're sending you a photograph. So they photographed a piece of grass, black and white. I figured, okay, this is my piece of land in Jack Daniels, Lynchburg, Tennessee. And we'd like to introduce you to your 2 neighbors on either side, Mr. Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones and Mr. Nixon, the former president. And I'm going, if they're my neighbors, I'm drinking too much. And that's when I kind of quit. I quit drinking after that. And to this very day, I still have a plot of land, 1 square foot, in the Jack Daniels Brewing Company of Tennessee. But I will tell you that they became a bit popular, and they're a bit watered down Jack Daniels. If you want to get the real Jack, you have to buy Gentleman Jack. That's the real old-fashioned stuff, and it's actually quite nice if you like that kind of sour mash kind of whiskey. I'm much more of a 16-year-old Lagavulin Scotch person, the drink of true researchers. People have actually died researching, writing, and drinking Lagavulin. So there you go. Last thing on your lips before you cross over to the room next door, 16-year-old Lagavulin, and you go, oh. And the taste of a beautiful woman as well. You can't beat that. The most wonderful thing in the world.
How about both,
if that's your thing?
How about both together?
Huh?
How about both together?
Both, absolutely.
And you're going to have to give the ladies their opportunity to give their list at some point too.
Absolutely. So what would you do?
Oh golly, absolutely, with a beautiful man, and either the purest water on the planet, or oh boy,
have you drunk one?
The purest water. Well, I've drank from the goddess well in Glastonbury.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty good. And not just in this life. And I guess I would have to say some really beautiful, beautiful French red wine, but I haven't found exactly the right one. Although I do know that Scotch you're talking about, and that is super amazing. I think I'm kind of a lightweight, so I can't.
If you go to Paris,
a thimble full.
You ever go to Paris?
No, not yet.
Well, when you go, and you shouldn't go for less than a weekend, especially in the autumn, it's beautiful, very romantic. And it's my favorite time of going. And you go to Les Grands Colberts, and you have to book up a month in advance to get a table. It's not easy to find. Les Grands Colberts. And it's behind the opera. And there is no cell phones, there's no electronic gizmos. It's just a quiet murmur of conversation with friends. No music, palms, ball lighting, and all the wood is curved. There's not a single straight piece of wood anywhere in the building. It's 1903, it's Beaux-Arts. The best meal you've ever had, one of the most expensive meals you'll ever have, the best service on earth. And you ask them for a Bordeaux Fort, which is a good bottle of good Bordeaux. And I tell you, that is the best French red I've ever had, ever. Yeah. It'll probably cost you about $50 for the bottle, but you know, once a year you should treat yourself to an excellent meal, and that's the one I go for.
That sounds beautiful.
With a wonderful woman or man who loves you across the table. Put that out there. And the best water, there's a glacier in New Zealand. It's a 4-hour hike on the way to Milford Sound. Before you go through with all the tourists, you take a left turn and you go off. And it's, I think it's Mavera Lake. I think it's Mavera Lake. You'll find it on Google Earth. And it's a trail that's not often used, not popular. And you go up for 3 hours of nice steep inclines. So you've got to get your boots and everything. And then there's a tundra. And then you come across this beautiful jade green lake. There's nobody there. 3 mountains on either side, which used to be where the glacier used to be. All that's left is now at the top. So you can't really climb it. It's vertical. You have the whole place to yourself. You realize you've run out of water. So you go, I'm going to go to the waterfall. Another 30 minutes walk. And you get there and you look around and you're hot and you go, oh, what the hell? And you know it's going to hurt because you rip off all your clothes and all you can do is scream under the waterfall because it's freezing cold. And the water touches your lips. The water is coming out of a glacier that's over 20,000 years old. And it's sweet like honey. And you can taste the mineral on your tongue, and you can't stop drinking it. And you're getting high from the water because it's got so much oxygen. You start hallucinating, and you fill up all your bottles of water. That is as pure as you can get. And who would have thought that water was that good, that you don't have to have dinner because it nourishes you in itself. So yeah, glacial water.
Yes, it's you can do that just with the ether in the right state of being.
Ah, you've mastered this.
Yeah, just drinking in that beautiful spiritual elixir. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I
like this conversation. This is really good fun. You get to learn a lot.
I know. It beats the heck out of government work.
Yeah, well, especially now.
No, it's all right. It's all right. It keeps the bills paid, as you said. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, watch out for that leap of faith.
It's coming.
It's coming to find you.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much. Lovely chatting.
Lovely. Thank you, everybody.
See you soon.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. Take care.
Bye.